Senator Menendez asked the right question, that in the absence of this chamber doing the right thing, and that is staying consistent with what the Republican leader, Senator McConnell, said some years ago, that sunlight's the best disinfectant, that we should disclose everything. He wanted unlimited mostly, I believe, if I recall, unlimited contributions, but full disclosure. He has changed his position on that. I assume to protect the oil industry and perhaps the Chinese money that's coming in these elections, or the big Wall Street banks that have opposed my election, and I assume the presiding officer, because of his work on banking issues, will come in against him in Oregon. I think this whole idea, Senator Menendez suggested, that voters are going to start, if the Senate won't move, voters will start asking the question, who is giving this money and why are they putting this kind of money in? I rise and I thank Senator Shaheen for her leadership in this, because big corporations and wealthy investors are flooding our elections with campaign money. They're looking for gain. We don't really know who the money's from. We can guess. We think it's, in my state, we think it's oil companies. We think it's Wall Street banks. We think it could be money from Chinese interests, whether it's money laundered from China through American corporations or directly from American corporations who specialize in outsourcing jobs to China and make more money. Look what happened with the Olympics just recently. If that doesn't sort of beg the question, we know that these dollars in Ohio were drowning out the voices of working middle-class people in my state and across the country. Consider this, Mr. President, the television market in Cleveland, Ohio, is the 18th largest media market in the country. Lots of cities come to mind that are larger: Philadelphia and Houston and Detroit and New York and Chicago and LA and San Francisco and Washington, D.C. and Boston. Many cities, many media markets larger than Cleveland's, 18th largest television market in the country, about 1.5 million viewers. Cleveland now is number 2 ranked in the country in political spending, larger than New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Houston and San Diego. But only Los Angeles has had more money spent in its TV market than has Cleveland. Columbus, a market still significant, but smaller than Cleveland's, is not far behind in political spending. Why is that? The presidential race in Ohio, the Senate race in Ohio, a congressional race in Ohio with 2 incumbents, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, facing off, with most of the money spent by special interest groups, undisclosed secret money on Cleveland television, on Columbus television, mostly against candidates, mostly against incumbents, mostly against people who have a history of standing up for the middle class, against oil company interests, who have a history of standing up for jobs, against bad trade agreements where companies that outsource to China, which they benefit from, standing up to Wall Street banks who have done significant damage to our country and to our economy. We don't know for sure where this money comes from. They won't disclose it. The people paying for these ads are simply unwilling to step out of the shadows. It's not hard to guess, but you simply can't prove it. Since at the same time, Mr. President, all these ads that have come into Cleveland, that have come into Columbus, and all over my state, nonpartisan fact-check organizations have discovered that many of these ads in my state are false. They have a rating. They have a true, mostly false, and the worst rating is Pants on Fire. Pants on Fire suggests that people running these ads or or groups making these statements willfully disregard the truth, or, to put it more succinctly, simply lie. And we're seeing in many of these ads that are run by these special interest groups, they're simply lying. They get a false or they get a Pants on Fire rating from PolitiFact. A national organization, won the Pulitzer Prize, nonpartisan, has no partisan leanings, no ideological leanings. It's no surprise, Mr. President, people paying for these ads don't want to be associated with them. If they're an oil company, they don't really want the public to know how they're lying. If they're an American corporation that outsources to China. They don't really want the American public to know that they're the ones paying for these ads and lying. That's why this legislation is so important. These wealthy, unnamed, out-of-state donors can get away with this. We know this by now because the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision sweeps aside decades worth of established jurisprudence and allows corporations and very wealthy individuals to spend as much as they like to defeat politicians who don't do their bidding. Big businesses and large and billionaires shouldn't be able to buy elections. Citizens should know who's behind the ads aimed at winning their votes. One of his fireside chats in a very different era and a very different political environment with very different media available to them, President Franklin Roosevelt said, "The use of power by any group, however situated, to force its interest or to use its strategic position in order to receive more from the common fund than its contribution to the common fund justifies, is an attack against and not an aid to our national life." In a nutshell, President Roosevelt said, he could have been speaking to this issue today, that he called them the malefactors of great wealth. He called them economic royals. He called them a lot of things, very, very wealthy people that had disproportionate influence on their national government, even with a president that was fighting for the middle class, that was fighting for the common man against these interest groups. That's why, Mr. President, the democracy is strengthened by casting light on Spending and Elections Act. The DISCLOSE Act matters. We need to pass this bill. The DISCLOSE Act would ensure greater accountability and transparency in corporate political spending, requires the disclosure of campaign-related fundraising and spending by outside groups. Over the course of the past 2 years, we've seen politics increasingly influenced by millionaires and billionaires who secretly give unlimited amounts of money to manipulate American politics. These multimillionaires are trying to secretly buy elections. The DISCLOSE Act would prevent these corporations and wealthy individuals from using shell front groups to hide their donations from disclosure. By giving millions of dollars in secret money, these mega donors are looking to cash in on policies that will benefit their big business interests. Now, Mr. President, I don't want to make this about my state. I mentioned the huge money in Cleveland, the huge money in Columbus. We're seeing it Toledo market. We're seeing it in Dayton market, Cincinnati market, Youngstown market, even those TV markets on the periphery of the state that serve other states, Wheeling, West Virginia, Parkersburg, West Virginia, Charleston, Huntington, West Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, states where you might buy the television that Ohioans will see. And I don't want to make this about my campaign. In my campaign, we've seen already in Ohio $10.5 million in special interest money laundered, and I use that term advisedly, laundered through groups like the United States Chamber of Commerce, laundered through groups like Crossroads. That's the group associated with the political, the George Bush's political director, whatever his title was. Money coming through 60 Plus, money laundered through Concerned Women of America, who decidedly aren't, I might add. Money laundered through all kinds of organization, undisclosed secret money that comes in and does attack ads against elected officials. I can stand up on my own. I'm not all that concerned about what it means to me. I am concerned that those groups, undisclosed, want to buy elections. And you know why they want to buy elections? They want to buy elections so they can continue the subsidies they get in the tax break for the oil companies. They want to buy elections so they can continue to outsource jobs to China and write trade rules that make it easier and more profitable to do that. They want to buy elections because they want to stop our efforts to force the 6 largest banks in the country, the Wall Street banks, to divest some of their earnings. So they're not just too big to fail, they're also too big to manage and too big to regulate. They want to buy elections, these outside groups, because they want to continue the preferential treatment they get in this Congress when they're drug companies, and to stop generic drugs and to stop negotiation directly with the drug companies to save money for seniors for their pharmaceutical drugs. That's what they have at stake. Always, frankly, against the public interest, always an attack on the middle class, always an assault on people that simply want an opportunity to get ahead in this country. Just an opportunity, not a gift, not a handout, but an opportunity to go to college, an opportunity to go to to go to Lorain County Community College, an opportunity to go to school and be able to pay back their loans, an opportunity to get a decent job and stay in the town they grew up in so they can raise children around their grandparents, all the kinds of things that most Americans agree with. The DISCLOSE Act would prevent these corporations from continuing to deceive the public and simply not informing the public what's happening. Their priorities erode protections and safeguard for middle-class workers and their families. They seek to extend tax shelters for the top 1%. This is not just an attack on the integrity of our democracy. That's fundamentally what it is, but that's not why they do it. They do it because it's a direct assault on middle-class families in working Americans. The 1% will do increasingly better because of Citizens United. The 1% is mostly behind these efforts and mostly behind the efforts to defeat the DISCLOSE Act. Democracy demands openness in the public square, in our public conversations, and in when that most sacred democratic tool, our elections. Under Citizens United, what we have is a sale, not a democracy. It's an auction going to the highest bidder. It's not an election. Our nation's highest court took an issue that was not even presented to the court and decided to overturn a century of legal precedent. Our largest companies straddle the globe. They wield enormous influence already. The top Fortune 500 companies reap billions in profits. The average Ohio household struggles to break even, as does the average household from Senator Whitehouse's Rhode Island, Senator Shaheen's New Hampshire. The largest corporations leverage their enormous economic power into seemingly unchecked political clout. 2011, corporations spent $3.3 billion lobbying Congress to influence legislation. $3.3 billion to lobby Congress, exerting far more influence on our political process than they should. We know they spent this $3.3 billion because they were required by law to disclose what they spent. My guess is if that law didn't exist, that they had to disclose what they were spending on lobbying, that some of my colleagues would vote against disclosure for them, what they're spending to influence. So they spend $3.3 million to lobby. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars in elections. They work to pull back voter rights, to repeal and roll back voter rights.
The senator has used 10 minutes.
Okay, I will wrap up. Thank you. If I could have unanimous consent for another 1 minute, Mr. President.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have no idea, though, what these groups are spending as they try to undermine our election system. What we know is that corporations and roving, if I could use that word, front groups are already pouring hundreds of millions into campaigns. The DISCLOSE Act can help clear these murky waters. The question ultimately, if we can't pass this, that our citizens need to ask is, why are they spending all this money, and who are these people spending this money? Who's spending it? Why are they spending tens of millions in my state and other states around the country? What is it they want? When voters start asking that question, I think the answer will be pretty self-evident. I thank Senator Whitehouse and Senator Shaheen for their work on this. I yield the floor, Mr. President.